Welcome, everyone, to another episode of Behind the Human. I'm your host, Mark Champagne, and it's my job to unpack the stories and mental fitness practices of people living at the top of their game, personally and professionally. And I'm super excited about today's guest. As Michigan's first ever Chief Growth and Marketing Officer, Hilary Doe leads all growth, marketing, and communication efforts at the Michigan Economic Development Corporation, working to grow the state's population, economy, reputation. With a dynamic background spanning nonprofits, technology, and public policy, she now spearheads major initiatives supporting the state's comprehensive blueprint for growth. I feel like your job's got to be really fun. Welcome to the show.
It's really fun. Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here, and you nailed it. I'm frequently pinching myself. It's honestly also a real honor. I know that can sound a little baby hokey or something, but I love my place and the place that I'm from, and getting the chance to do really fun, wonderful work in service of that place is such an honor. So I'm really happy to get to be here.
Yeah, I feel that. And also, unless this has changed since I last read this, but it's not just a new position for the state of Michigan. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but it's the only state that has a position like yours, right?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, Michigan is one of about 34% of states that had been seeing population stagnation. So we've been about the same size for a long time, and wanted to get ahead of the challenge of making sure that we can retain our young folks and attract folks here. You may have heard about the talent war that folks are talking about across the country. And we just want to make sure we're building a place, that our people can be successful in and want to stay in. And if folks across the country want to come and join us, great. But that was really the impetus for creating this role, helping us fill many open jobs in our growing economy. Michigan's never had a chief growth officer, and no other state has said out loud, yes, I'm going to take these population growth challenges on, or created a role like this one. So yes, I'm also, the first chief growth officer of any state in the nation. And I think that really is an exciting opportunity for us to innovate and think about what tackling a complex challenge like this could look like. I guess the reason others haven't, said this out loud and taken it on is exactly because it's hard. And
yeah, I was going to say, it's probably
complex.
exciting and scary.
Yeah, right.
Right?
It's not one seeing population growth is, an amalgamation of a bunch of factors. Folks decide where they're going to be based on their opportunities and the jobs available, their ability to get access to great education and community, to great places that are high amenity, and that basket of offerings is different for every person. So it is a complex challenge to wrap arms around and take on, but it's also existential and essential for our communities across the state and our employers and our young people themselves. So I'm grateful that there was some bravery required to say, yes, we want to do this.
Totally. I love it. And I love it because, and this is why I originally reached out, is that I think the topic that you cover, and of course, in my mind, and speaking my language around mental fitness, like the mental clarity that you have to probably continue to foster and support in your own mind, is so transferable in so many different ways, not just in, facilitating, growth in a state, and ensuring that, a state is like prosperous and feels good, and people want to, stay and come back and so forth. I feel like the topic is so transferable. So I can't wait to dive in, but I've already started breaking my own rule because I'm excited about this topic. I always open every interview without, I shared your bio, obviously, so people have context and perspective. But then to start things off, I'd like to try to strip away the bio and understand you as a person. And then we can jump right back into the topic. So the question I asked to do that is just, who are you?
And folks don't ask it enough. So maybe everyone should come on your podcast.
Working on it.
Well, even before I, had this job, my friends would tell me I was a walking Pure Michigan commercial. So maybe it's apropos of this current role that I'm in. I have Michigan tattooed on my arm to tell you how committed I am to this one. So all to say, I think that's relevant to the answer to the question, who am I? Because, you know, I've reflected on this a little bit, especially since having my children and having to make
Yeah.
decisions about how I spend my life hours, as everyone does.
Mm.
And I think at the center, it's always been, despite, being in diverse industries or, having a busy life like we all do, um, a real desire to have mission driven work and to build communities or be part of communities because I'm such a believer that
Yeah.
communities are powerful. That's like sort of the through line in everything that I've done. It's infectious once you've
Yeah.
had an experience like that. And I think I was lucky enough to have an incredible formative experience in community in college, for example. And then have
Okay.
sort of been chasing it, ever since in all kinds of other contexts. And, one of the
What do you
things I say,
What do you
oh,
ho
sorry, go
can
ahead.
I sorry, just
Yeah,
touch on the point
please.
because I think that's so powerful. What
Yeah.
just if you go back to the college years, like,
Yep.
what was it about that the power of that community that
Mhm.
really stayed what was it about the power of that community that
Yeah.
really
Well,
in your
when
mind and
I
that,
went to
like you said,
college
been
here
kind of
in
chasing ever
state, at
since?
the University of Michigan. I grew up in Michigan, but I'm a boomerang, so I've lived all over the place
Oh,
and then
okay.
chose to come home. But when I was on campus, um, Hurricane Katrina happened, and then chose
Yeah.
to come home. But when I was on, and I remember sort of being really moved by wanting to help, but also being far away. I was in Michigan, and feeling like someone like me isn't the kind of person who can help. I'm not the
Mm.
kind of person who's moneyed or resourced, or I don't know anybody. My parents are public school teachers from a small town. It just didn't feel like
Sure.
it felt like that was someone else. But there was a group of us on campus who, you know, came together, ended up going down there and doing service work, ended up founding an organization after that. And,
Mm.
at the end of the day, had hundreds of folks in it and participating, working in local communities between New Orleans and the University of Michigan, writing, policy solutions to support those communities and coming back and rejuvenation. Actual General Honore, who ended up being one of the heroes of, that whole effort in the rebuild, came to campus actually to
Oh,
thank us
wow.
for some of our work. And it was just a realization that it was true to some extent that I by myself wasn't the person who could help, but that
Sure.
together there was nothing, that a group of
Yeah.
humans couldn't do, which again, I realize these sound like cat posters or memes
Yeah.
or something, right? But I think it's so important to talk about, what impossible means, that there's just no such thing.
Sure.
And I think the difference between possible and impossible is just, a group of humans doing something together.
That's rich. I love that. And it makes so much sense just knowing what you do today. I mean, I can imagine and kind of in retrospect that moment, and I'm sure there are others, but it seems like that was a pretty formidable moment for you around just again how powerful community can be and what like kind of what mountains you can move when you come together as a collective. How did you feel then when you were in New York for about a decade, right? I believe when you left. Did you feel did you feel like you had a loss of community or was it just a different community? Like how did that whole era of your life play out?
Well, I think that I guess I was going to say lucky, but I think the truth is also intentional about trying
Sure.
to build community everywhere I've been, but also always wanting to come home. I had fallen in love with Detroit before I left. And so was, stomping around, talking about the place I was from everywhere I went.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, because
it's
you got the tattoo in
easy.
Brooklyn, right?
Right, exactly.
Yeah, that
It's
that
it's,
proves the point.
yeah, exactly. It's easy to, rep a place like Detroit because some people don't get it yet, and
Yeah,
if that's the case, you wanna make sure
they get
they've
it.
seen the light.
Yeah.
And so now a lot of folks have seen the light, which is great. But anyway, so I'll just say I feel like I had a great community in New York, and we've done work to try to stay close with with those folks as much as I can. But I also had maintained relationships here, and I was in LA briefly, and
Okay.
that rich kind of fabric of I used to say I want to be able to crash on someone's couch in every city I land in,
Yeah.
because I think that makes it feel like there are limitless kind of possibilities, and you can pour into each other and help also whatever crazy idea they have become a possibility as well.
So what brought you back and what brought you to the work that you're doing today?
Yeah. Well, I got to a place in, my life and career where it was possible for me to move somewhere else, and also impossible for my husband. And for any listeners who are in New York today, I love New York City. I was in Brooklyn for
Yes.
most of that time, but I was pregnant with my second child, and I had a small child, and I looked around our 800 square foot apartment and said, there are too many mammals in here for, just a tiny apartment.
Yeah.
And I missed home, and wanted to figure out a way to get her. So we impulsively moved back, and I kept doing the work that I was doing. I was in leadership, president of a tech company, actually, that built technology for advocacy efforts and movements and nonprofits to build community to accomplish their mission.
Yeah.
So very on par or on the nose for me.
Yeah.
So I kept doing that work, but I also started a think tank here in Michigan focused on state level policy issues.
Mm.
And that got keep me connected to lots of state level policymakers and advocates who are tackling really tough challenges of their own. So, I think when the need to take something as unwieldy as population growth on came up, luckily someone thought, I think Hillary would be down to do something wild like that. And I'm very
I
grateful
feel it.
that they did. Yeah.
I get that. Like I've only
Yeah.
I mean, I've only known you for what, 10 minutes now, but I already feel that. Like if your energy in general is infectious, which is a beautiful thing, and I'm
Oh,
sure you
thanks.
know that, and I appreciate it, and I'm sure everyone listening appreciates it. So, to have a role like what you have and to spread that and bring others to kind of amplify it and make it exponential is so powerful. I actually I was kind of hinting towards this before we hit record, but I'm not sure if Brittany shared this with you, but I read a small little kind of excerpt, well, not an excerpt, but just like a little feature in Monocle magazine about the work that you're doing, which I was actually first kinda I mean, because Monocle's like, as you probably know, pretty Europe-based. I mean, every now and then, obviously, there's stuff going on in North America, but I would say primarily, and that's actually why I like reading it, because I feel like it triggers my mind to think differently and whatnot, and just see other things that are going on that are outside of the North America. But I read the feature on you and what you're up to, and I'm like, that is just so interesting, and had to reach out, and that's how all of this started essentially, because I've never had someone like yourself or in a position like what you have on the show. So anyway, I'm
It's cool.
the
I love to hear
yeah,
that. When you do all
yeah.
these things, you're
'Cause you
curious.
never know, yeah,
You
like,
might
who's
see them,
reading, like totally, totally,
Yeah.
and this is
Yeah.
what I love about all of this, like, the ripple, like, that was one little piece, then the ripple of that is that, obviously, we're having this conversation, there's a whole bunch of people on the other side as well, and I'm also proud to say, a lot of, American listeners, I'd say the vast majority of the audience, even though I'm in
Right.
Canada, is American-based, and then who knows who's listening on that side, right? So, it's again, it's that in this case, it's that kind of virtual community in a way that usually then, and this has happened so many times, somehow gets together and mobilizes in person in real life, which is always amazing to see. So
Such
the
a beautiful thing to have in this era.
yeah,
We have needed to rely on virtual community. And, now to be able to figure out how to maintain that, but also get what we need in person. I
yeah,
think both of those things are so critical.
yeah,
And so it's wonderful to have a community like this that you can activate online. And then to your point, hopefully that helps unlock things for folks when they're in person together.
for
Um,
sure.
just related to some of the work that we do, I think this might be relevant. One of the things I talk about a fair amount is, we're trying to make sure we're, again, building a place that is compelling, right? And
Hmm.
that works for, as a value proposition that works for, especially our young folks. And so often we're seeing more social isolation, not just in Michigan, right? But across the country,
Yeah, for
across the
sure.
world, especially among our young people. And folks struggling with, mental health and things like that. And I often talk about, it's incumbent on us to make sure that we're doing everything we can to support those folks and also to offer opportunities to get folks out into the community. Because as long as somebody's in their living room, we don't have a
Yeah,
right to retain them. Then
yeah,
our place is a commodity. They might as well be in Portland or in London
yeah,
or in Columbus, Ohio, or anywhere. It's completely interchangeable, right? The
yeah,
uniqueness of your place is the thing, that is makes you not a commodity, right? Makes and
yeah,
and and that's the only way we have a right to retain anybody. So when I got the role originally, I doubt anyone thought we'd be thinking about, we have to talk about social isolation and centering mental health. I was really interested in the work the Surgeon General is doing, for example, on this issue. But otherwise, again, you don't have a right to retain or attract anybody,
yeah,
So,
yeah.
so I actually do think it starts there with that kind of work.
Well, you're definitely preaching to the choir over here because I mean, I get the great honor every now and again to speak at colleges and universities and to students about mental fitness and the tools that are available for our minds. And there's on one hand, of course, I'm very grateful, and it's always energizing to see how receptive they are and open and how they want the tools. But on the other hand, I see the flip side of when I ask, students to check in with one word to describe how their mind has felt the last 3, 4 days. It's not pretty. Like I mean, I don't know about you, but I mean, I remember my time in kind of post-secondary education being, yes, stressful, but not at this level. And it's just, I hear things like just tired, overwhelmed, stressed, anxious, all of this stuff. And the reason the reason a couple of reasons that I'm really excited about the work that you're doing and the fact you're doing a lot of listening and a lot of speaking to that younger generation as well. And like coming together in even this capacity is that if we can give people, especially the younger folk, like the tools to just clear out some of that mental pressure and stress, then we have, this is unbiased, of course, but we have much higher probability of them thinking of things that others aren't thinking about or innovating or seeing clearly. And because we've all been there as well. Like when we're max stress, it's not when we do our best work. And we don't feel good, right? And I think we deserve first and foremost to feel good most days than not, which unfortunately is not the case right now. But if we can get people there, then again, like the ripple effect of that is we can really come together and move things more efficiently and faster and so forth. So yeah, what are you seeing in the community? And like what are some of the initiatives that you've got going on to help, that demographic?
Well, when we kicked off this effort, I was talking about how complex it is and how many potential first actions you could take. There isn't an
Mm,
obvious, first path to walk down. And so, I believe deeply that there's wisdom in the community that we should follow
yeah.
their lead. And so when we kicked off the work, the first thing we did was start, to your point, I think earlier, a listening tour. I think sometimes folks say that, and then what they actually do is a bunch of stump speeches all
Yeah.
over town.
Yeah.
And that is not what we did
Yeah.
all over town. And sort of like round table, blue counties, red counties, suburban areas and rural areas, our cities, the Upper Peninsula. We tried to get everywhere,
Mm,
and got the opportunity in that first. Gosh, how long was that first sprint? Maybe only 3 or 4 months. To speak to and get feedback from over 10,000 Michiganders,
wow.
asking them what they love about their place, but also what's between them and building their future here. And then I told everyone in every room I was in and told them and took this very seriously. that not only did we want to ensure we were listening and getting feedback, but it's our responsibility to then do something with it
Yeah.
because, and make sure that they see it. Because I think one of the sort of antidotes to some of these really oppressive feelings, and again, all of us have had them, right, of helplessness or impossibility or overwhelm is agency, that
Yeah.
you have some agency to articulate what's important to you, to shape things. Again, I talked about that formative experience. For me, I think that's what it was rooted in, this realization that together, we do have agency. No reality fell from the sky. We're making it, right?
Yeah.
And that will only be true for people if they not only tell us what they want, but then they see a change. They see
Yeah.
some result
And
from
then
it.
they talk about that.
Absolutely. And that's what we've seen. So we've tried to really be in communication, with
Yeah.
folks, both listening and centering their voices, but then also delivering on, some of what they let us know were critical priorities early and often,
Mhm.
and showing up consistently, so that we don't disappear, but that they continue to be in a driver's seat, going forward. Because
Yeah.
I think facilitating that agency is paramount.
Well, so can you give us some tangible examples of some of the output that has come to fruition based on some of these listening
Yeah.
tours and whatnot? I'm just thinking of from a historical timeline right
Mhm.
now, or the time you were recording this. I
Yeah.
mean, I saw a pretty big initiative over at Art Basel,
Yeah.
and then I think there's that startup pitch competition that I also noticed on your social feeds and whatnot. Like, there's some really cool things happening.
Absolutely. Yeah, we talked to, like I mentioned, tons of folks, got feedback, and what we heard were a few things. I mean, this might seem obvious, but uh, wasn't obvious till they told us, right? They
Yeah.
want great opportunities, so that means access to, post-secondary opportunities, certifications, things like that,
Mm.
and those can feel overwhelmingly expensive for folks, right? And so that was one of the things that rose to the top, as well as access to great jobs and the opportunity to be entrepreneurial. All of those things came out. So just to start there, to take action against that, we wrote a report, reported that out, provided it to the governor's office, and in her budget, this wasn't, a month after our report was released, she announced free access for every high school student in the state of Michigan to community college to
Wow.
prove that you want post-secondary access, you can get it. Because
Yeah.
we don't want to be the thing that's in your way.
Yeah.
They also rolled out pre-K for all 4-year-olds in Michigan, in part because we heard from across the state, folks want to work and access the labor force, but childcare was one of the number one challenges that came up, especially for young families, that was, preventing them from being able to
Yeah.
participate fully in the way that they wanted to. So that was almost, again, not within a month of the report coming out in the State of the State address. Um, in addition to that, programmatically from our office, as you mentioned, the pitch competition, things like that, that's rooted in a desire to support entrepreneurship. Detroit, some folks
Yeah.
don't know this yet, but I'll stand for us a little, plug us. The second fastest growing startup ecosystem in America. But that
Oh, wow.
only matters if those
Yeah.
folks feel supported and can
Yeah.
stay and can scale their companies here. And it can include everyone. So
Mhm.
one of the things I'm most proud of is this emerging ecosystem of Black and Brown founders as part of Black Tech Saturdays. Almost 1,000 founders are meeting, and tech folks are meeting every week in Detroit. And that community is, you know, unparalleled and also so critically important for us to ensure we're wrapping arms around. We partnered
Yeah.
with them and went to Afrotech and to Art Basel to make sure that they have the support that they need from investors, the talent they need from across the country, and that folks who want to be part of that community know it exists and can come and join us. We also supported a startup with in a pitch competition that the governor's office helped us support, and made sure that one of our startups got that $100,000 grant. But even more importantly, got the amplification and the visibility, and the mark of our support that we're behind them, right? And I think that's just the beginning. I could go
Yeah.
on,
No, no,
but
I
those are some of the things I'm proud of.
I love it. I'm curious. I mean, you kind of touched on this, or I think maybe what you just shared is something that would help with this. But just the idea around like creating a buzz in the state, because I think of, again, I'm your neighbor from the north, obviously, and I think of places like Austin and Texas that like seem to be always popping up for various company headquarters and startups and stuff like that. And I wonder, like, how do you go about doing that? And that takes time. Like, that's the other thing about your role that is so interesting to me, is that this isn't like, hey, we're gonna solve all of this in 12 months or in a term. Like, this is a long-term effort. But I feel, again, as someone who hasn't lived in the state, but obviously knows some of the history, it's so possible. Because I mean, look at, like, obviously the history of the state and the car industry and all that, like
Right.
the hub for the world at one point. Like, it's very possible.
Absolutely. And, our history, I think a really important one to underscore is in our creative class, genre creators. Folks think of Motown, but also we're the birthplace of techno. I mention it
Yeah,
because
you're right. That's true.
we have
Yeah.
those innovators, and we have, more engineers per capita than any other state, that kind of thing. But it's also this like rich culture of creativity. And the thing the
Yeah.
tie that binds between those two things is, that entrepreneurial, innovative spirit. And folks here are makers.
Yeah.
And that's, I think, the sort of centerpiece that we're really trying to make sure everybody knows about, and we get credit for, because I think it's well deserved. You mentioned Austin. They're having a wonderful, sort of moment in this regard. Nashville also, and
Yeah.
neither of those places, when I was a kid, had the same um, reputation that they do today, which is just evidence that places are what we make them.
Hmm.
And I think our people, the beautiful thing I've got is a wonderful product. Our people have already made this incredible place.
Yeah.
We just need to make sure everybody knows about it, and that we are clear that we're listening enough to build the kind of future that everyone here wants to create, and we're delivering against it, which you can't say everywhere. So, yeah, how do
Yeah.
you build a buzz? Honestly, I think, part of what we're trying to do is go on these road shows and share our stories. And most importantly, I think Michigan can only say Michigan's cool for so long. We need to make sure that our people are our best ambassadors, right? And feel emboldened to speak about what's going on. They're better ambassadors than I am at letting
Yeah.
everyone know, we have the fastest growing clean energy job sector in America, or that we're leading the fight against the climate crisis. You might think I'm a bag of wind, but you would believe them,
Yeah.
right? And
Yeah.
so we're working hard to make sure that they're in this movement that needs to last a long time, that Michiganders themselves own this effort and feel responsible for it enough that they want to share and build the buzz on our behalf. And I think
Because
that's
they're
arguably
proud.
the most critical thing we could do, because they're proud. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so, yeah, it's always retention first. Starts, with us being happy and healthy and doing the work, so that we can attract folks to come and join us.
Well, you're attracting me. I mean, can you sponsor me? It's a bit crazy in Canada right now, so I'd happily come
At
over.
least come and visit. I give a great tour.
Exactly. I
Well,
love it. I'd like to pivot a little bit just
yeah.
to you personally around, because again, like, it's such these are big questions I imagine that you're facing, and I
Mm,
know it's not just you. Obviously, there's a whole team, and like you said, it's the whole community and whatnot.
yes.
But I suspect like, that's a lot of pressure for an individual, and also like first in a brand new role and whatnot. So I'd love to know just the Hillary, the human of the Hillary, I guess you could say. Like, what do you do? What are some of your foundational practices or non-negotiables that help your mind, zoom out of the noise, or be clear, or bring back inspiration when you might be in a low and whatnot?
Appreciate that question, because I do. think that, when you're doing hard things, you have to create enough space for yourself to keep taking them on. You mentioned this isn't a sprint. This is
Mm.
a long game. And that's why we need other people in it with us. That's why I was saying Michiganders need to own it, but it's also why we all need to make sure we take care of ourselves. Our
Yeah.
team, I talk about that a lot. We need to create space because it's a marathon,
Yeah.
And this is perhaps bad podcasting, but the advice that I give folks, I'm trying to take myself, is that in order to have great ideas and be able to get up and tackle things with an fresh mindset and innovative mindset, you actually need to be a little bit bored sometimes.
Yeah. Oh, I
Um,
agree. Yeah.
and again, and maybe that's bad podcasting because we're
Not
talking
at
about
all.
boredom, but I think a way people can relate to this is when you have a great idea in the shower, or you have a great idea when you're on a long drive, and you're kind of on autopilot or what have
Mhm.
you, right? It's, I think, in those moments where you have like integrative thoughts where your mind can rest and where you come out the other side better off for yourself and your family and the mission you're trying to serve. And so
Yeah.
I really do try to cultivate, you know, every day moments of boredom.
Yeah.
Like, that looks
What
different every
practically, what
day.
does that look
Yeah.
like for you?
Yeah, yeah.
Like,
I
what are
think that
some
looks different.
examples?
Totally every day. Sometimes it looks like, um, making sure I have a little bit of alone time, putting the kids to bed, and I'll, watch
Yeah.
a boring show. What I
Yeah.
mean is something silly that
Yeah.
I don't need to think about very much. Other times it's like taking a long shower or a great bath. You know what I mean? I don't have a
Yeah.
detailed meditative practice,
No,
but
no,
for
but
me, it's truly
this is
like
exactly what I'm looking
boredom.
for.
It's like
This
whatever
is
it
real.
needs to be alone, and allow myself to rest in like a mental way. And then often
Yeah.
you kind of come out the other side, I think, in a better place.
Yeah. No, and so just so you know, I mean,
Yeah.
we get real practical on the show because
Yeah.
what you're sharing is real, and I think also, in my opinion, very accessible for the vast amount of people versus saying, "Yeah, I go on a 7-day silent retreat every quarter," or something
Sure.
like. And again, nothing wrong with any of that stuff,
No,
but
that's beautiful if you can
if
figure
we
it out.
totally. But it
Hmm.
like, what are the micro wins in that can stack up when because you're I mean, I'm super grateful to have been I've interviewed hundreds of people, and I would say the through line and theme is exactly what you're talking about, the ability and everyone does this differently, but the ability to still the mind and be able to think, or maybe not even think, just, like, clear some stuff out and let the mind breathe, right? But we're in a I think in a society in general where that still feels very abnormal. Like I did it intentionally yesterday and posted about this. I was chatting with you and saying we got dumped on with snow over here and there's a ski hill, which is great. So I went to the ski hill for the morning with some big questions and just knowing the science, having interviewed people that work in flow states, knowing that as I'm on the hill and I would pop off and have a coffee or whatever, that I can answer some of those questions like 10 steps deeper than trying to do that in between meetings, you know? But it still felt like, "Oh, I shouldn't be here. It's Wednesday. Like, I should be
Discouraged.
pounding on my
Yes.
keyboard," right?
Mhm. Yeah. There's so much, I don't know, emphasis on busy culture.
Yeah,
Like make sure you're busy. I don't even want to measure, my team knows this and they're probably bored of me talking about it, but I don't even want to measure outputs anymore. Folks measure output all
yeah,
the time. Like I did this many things, or we checked this many boxes, or we supported this many endeavors, right?
yeah,
I only want to measure outcomes because I think measuring outputs all the time just contributes to this busy culture. You
yeah,
could have successfully hit your output metrics by just moving boxes from one side of the room to the other, all day
mhm,
long. And I'd rather focus on the outcome and let folks create enough space for themselves that they can get something done much quicker than you
yeah,
can if you just fret over it and stew over it. Sometimes when I'm really stuck, I just take the dog for a walk, you know,
yeah,
just
for
take a break.
sure.
And I feel like it can be, the best thing for solving a difficult challenge or gaining some perspective and not getting lost in the reactivity of the day. I'm in a role where there's always a media cycle, a news cycle, some story coming out,
Yeah,
something to respond to, and
yeah,
it
the
can be hard to
fires.
sort. what of these things are driving the outcome and what of them are noise. And
Yeah.
sometimes, yeah, a walk with the dog or a, boring reality show are the
Yeah.
best way to sort those two things and land in a place where you're focused on what's important
Totally. Yeah.
for me.
Because our knee jerk reaction, I feel like, is we want to push through. And, sure, you can, but it's typically painful. And often, I think, in retrospect, when you look back at those moments, maybe the best decisions weren't made just because you are. It's almost like you have blinders on and you're just pushing, 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 right? Um, which, yeah,
For me, I certainly wouldn't say I'm not guilty,
yeah, of
of
course, you're human like the
of
rest of
doubling
us.
down, right? I think I am. But I try my best to save my energy for pushing through when I know where I'm going. You know,
Yeah,
I don't
yeah,
want to fret on the decision making part. Once you've decided on where you're going, then I've got some energy to go and go and go till I get there.
yeah,
But sometimes when you're at that crossroads moment, you just can't waste your time banging your head against a wall. It won't help, right? But once we're running, then I have some energy for it. So
yeah.
I think that's where I'm guiltiest of not taking a break.
Sure,
It's
sure.
when
I
we're
get that.
sprinting. I
Yeah,
was
yeah.
yeah.
Oh, this has been so fun. I mean, I've got one more question for you, but I just want to thank you for
Yeah.
what you're doing in this world and for everyone that lives in Michigan, but I think all around the world, because I think there's so much that people can take from the way you're approaching this and just this like excitement and the energy of what's possible, especially in a world right now where it feels like there's a lot of heaviness, there's a lot going on, obviously, that's I think outside of our control often. And I think it sucks creativity and energy from our souls often. And so to have a conversation like this where it's just I don't know, I feel pure possibility and just hopefulness and excitement. I mean, it's a gift. Just that itself is a gift. So thank you for that. And I guess my final question, Hillary, is and I don't know when this time will be. Obviously, you may not know either, but when I guess your mission kind of comes to an end, whatever that chapter looks like for you in the role that you're in, how do you want the state to feel?
Yeah. I love that question. Yeah. Well, first of all, I think if you are a mission driven person like I am, you're kind of usually trying to work yourself out of a job. And I think that's true in this case.
Yeah.
Um, and my focus is really on establishing infrastructure that can live, so that we're on the right path and we have inertia, and
Yeah.
it's going well.
Yeah.
Um, and then, you need less, rolling something up the hill kind of energy.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think when we'll know we're there, when the sort of biggest like dreams, that I've been hearing from folks across our state are easier for folks
Mm.
to implement and access. I think that's the core of what we're unlocking. It's what the emphasis is around entrepreneurship. It's the sort of intention around our brand work and traveling around telling our story. The intention around highlighting and amplifying our creatives. The hope is that folks have had that same transformative experience of having come together and created something, seeing the impact of that, and so every time after, the scope of potential action, the scope of, things we can change is larger than it was the day
Yeah.
before. And it's just easier for folks who pick their head up off their pillow in Michigan to make, things happen than it is, today or than it is arguably anywhere else, right? That's what I'm shooting for, that this is truly a land of opportunity. The birthplace of the middle class is again, that cradle of opportunity in the future. That's really, really my strong intention when folks feel that way and talk about our state that way. We'll know we've done it.
That's beautiful. Can't think of a better way to end the conversation. Thank you again for everything that you're doing. keep that mind nice and healthy so that we can get the best ideas and thinking and just that continued wonderful energy that you put out into this world. So thank you.
Thank you so much for having me. Appreciate you.